"I don't care who you think you are. Get out of my store right now, or I'll call security to have you thrown out." That voice echoed through the opulent space of the Beverly Hills jewelry boutique as Jessica Carter, a 42-year-old black woman, stood facing the store manager, Rebecca Wilson. Jessica's hands clenched slightly as she fought to stay calm. Her eyes flashed with such fierce intensity that the entire store fell silent. In that gaze was the restrained power of a woman who had been pushed to her limit countless times, the resilience of someone who had repeatedly confronted bias. Rebecca's face flushed with anger as she grabbed her phone. "I'll call the police. You look like a thief and ought to be arrested on the spot." But Jessica was quicker. She reached into her purse, pulling out her own phone with steady hands and a fearless look in her eyes. "Go ahead and call them. But first, let me make a call of my own." Little did Rebecca, the manager, know that this moment would mark the beginning of her downfall. The moment the true identity of the woman she'd just humiliated would be revealed to everyone. That morning, Jessica Carter, 42, dignified yet unassuming, parked her beat-up Toyota on the curb. All she carried was a worn silver bracelet, the only keepsake left from her late grandmother. No one inside Diamond Luxe suspected that this woman, no fur coat, no designer handbag, no entourage, would step into the breathtaking luxury of their flagship Beverly Hills store. The moment the automatic doors closed behind Jessica, the quiet hum of the showroom was pierced by the presence of this unfamiliar customer. From the central display case, Rebecca Wilson, white, blonde hair perfectly coiffed, clad in a sharp designer suit, glanced over coolly through the glass. There was no greeting, no polite smile, only a cold, scrutinizing stare. Rebecca approached, stopping a few steps away, maintaining an invisible line of separation. "I don't care who you are," Rebecca said, each word dripping with authority and challenge. "If you're not here for a specific reason, you need to leave right now. Otherwise, I'll have security escort you out." Her icy proclamation cut through the air like a knife. The other customers, a well-to-do white couple, a glamorous older woman, peeked over in stunned curiosity. Jessica tightened her grip on her silver bracelet, her expression calm but with a flicker of contained rage deep in her eyes. She understood this kind of treatment all too well. The looks, the attitude, the veiled insults aimed at her self-worth and dignity. But this time, she hadn't come to endure it, and she was no longer the young woman who once trembled and left in silence. The air in Diamond Luxe grew heavy, as if waiting for a tiny spark to ignite. Rebecca's arrogance clashed with Jessica's composed strength, turning the luxurious showroom into a battleground between two women, one wielding a false authority built on prejudice, the other standing firm with genuine dignity, honed by hard-earned experience. In that moment, everything began to shift. A story of justice, honor, and the quiet rise of self-respect was about to be written. Right here, where Jessica had once been deemed an outsider, someone who didn't belong. Amid that tense atmosphere, Jessica Carter stood silently, her deep-set eyes unwavering in the face of Rebecca Wilson's cold demeanor and false authority. Anyone who had watched Jessica in other situations would recognize that beneath her simple appearance lay a quiet strength, a pride forged by years of being looked down upon, shut out of every luxury door simply because of her skin color and background. But Rebecca didn't notice any of that. In her eyes, Jessica was nothing more than an outsider, undeserving of Diamond Luxe's lavish surroundings. Rebecca herself had been raised in a wealthy Connecticut family, where ancestral portraits lined the walls, where affluence was as natural as breathing, and a sense of superiority seemed to pass from generation to generation. When she entered the jewelry business, Rebecca carried with her both a refined taste and a rigid mindset. Only those who truly belonged deserved to experience the pinnacle of luxury. To her, Jessica's presence here was a blemish on the perfect facade of the flagship store. Yet, apart from Rebecca, and perhaps everyone else in the store that morning, no one knew that the woman in the worn blazer and plain flats was actually Jessica Carter, the founder and CEO of Diamond Luxe. Just over 2 decades ago, Jessica had been a server in a small Atlanta diner, struggling with bills, holding on to a distant dream of college, with scornful looks directed at her simply because her family was poor. It was that resilience and perseverance that shaped Jessica into a woman who refused to bow to any prejudice. From a tiny startup operating out of a makeshift desk made from an old cardboard box, she had methodically built Diamond Luxe into an empire of 47 stores stretching from glamorous New York to bustling Chicago, and all the way to Los Angeles, Dallas, Miami, and her childhood home of sunlit Atlanta. She designed jewelry coveted by Hollywood's top stars, earned glowing praise from Vogue, and appeared on Forbes' list of America's top 10 successful female entrepreneurs for 8 consecutive years. Yet, despite her hundreds of millions in assets and the kind of authority many only dream of, Jessica maintained an almost startlingly modest lifestyle. Her 2004 Toyota Corolla still took her wherever she needed to go. Her blazers were pressed every weekend, and she still wore the same weathered silver bracelet on her wrist. The only heirloom left by her grandmother, the one person who had ever believed she could achieve something extraordinary. "That's not about being stingy or pretending to be different," she once explained in an interview. "Every time I get behind the wheel of that old car, I remember where I've come from. I remember studying while washing dishes, and every single time people turned me away because they thought I didn't belong in their world." It was precisely that experience of being dismissed that drove Jessica to make Diamond Luxe a brand that welcomes anyone, regardless of skin color, background, or bank account. She often showed up unannounced at her stores, quietly watching to ensure no employee ever repeated the same mistake the world had made with her. But this morning, standing in the middle of Beverly Hills, inside the very store she designed with her own hands, Jessica was being treated like a stranger, stripped of her right to be seen, to be served, to be respected, just because she dressed simply and because of her skin color. Rebecca, in her impeccably tailored suit, had no idea she was repeating the same cruel prejudices Jessica had spent her life fighting to eradicate. And in that moment, everything inside Jessica went cold and resolute. Because this time, she was no longer the waitress of years past. This time, she held absolute authority, ready to do whatever it took to protect the dignity and worth of anyone dismissed simply for not appearing like everyone else. The silence that enveloped Jessica in the middle of the showroom wasn't just her reaction to the insult. It was a moment of quiet reflection on the painful yet proud journey that had shaped her into the woman she was today. As Rebecca, with her appraising gaze and frosty tone, asserted her supposed authority in this luxurious space, Jessica simply tightened her grip on the worn silver bracelet around her wrist, a silent reminder of so many memories. From her earliest days growing up in suburban Atlanta, Jessica had felt the brutal sting of prejudice. She'd been turned away from a jewelry store simply because of her dark skin, heard cruel whispers from bridal shop attendants while trying on dresses, had teachers advise her to be realistic about college, and endured co-workers at a diner treating her as if she were invisible, despite working twice as hard as anyone else. Those wounds never broke her. Instead, they fueled Jessica's resolve and strengthened her spirit. It was precisely the harshness of her past that gave rise to Jessica Carter's guiding principles for both life and business. If someone walks out of one of my stores feeling belittled, She once told her senior management team at a launch meeting for Diamond Luxe's expansion, "Then I have failed." She established what she called the 4 no's. No judging customers by appearance, no inquiries about personal circumstances, no discrimination based on background, and no turning anyone away for arbitrary reasons. Despite Rebecca Wilson's formal training in management and her ability to court high society clientele, she operated under the belief that she had the right to determine who was worthy of this space. In Rebecca's view, white customers in tailored suits, carrying Chanel bags, arriving in Bentleys automatically deserved a glass of champagne and a plush armchair, while people like Jessica, dressed modestly, speaking little, driving older cars, were forever confined to the fringes or dismissed outright with a single glance. For Jessica, those old wounds had never fully healed, and under her roof they would never be allowed to reopen. That was why each month she personally picked a random Diamond Luxe location to visit unannounced, quietly observing how employees interacted with customers. Those undercover visits were her way of auditing the company's culture, not by poring over financial reports or press praise, but through the simple things: eye contact, smiles, and even small gestures like how a sales associate treated the most unassuming customer. More than once, Jessica had witnessed heartening acts: a young employee helping an elderly client try on a bracelet, a security guard greeting a child with a genuine smile. In those moments, she made note quietly, sending gifts, raising salaries, or promoting employees, no fanfare required. Conversely, any hint of discrimination or disdain toward a customer, and Jessica dealt with it swiftly and uncompromisingly. That was how she protected Diamond Luxe's core value. We don't just sell jewelry, we sell an experience of respect and pride for everyone. But not everyone within the company shared her passion. Rebecca Wilson, born and raised among the elite, accustomed to cocktail parties and prestigious private schools, considered Jessica little more than an eccentric control freak, and Jessica's equality edicts nothing but hollow theory. In practice, Rebecca believed that only worthy clients could keep Diamond Luxe's flagship afloat in Beverly Hills. Customers who reminded her of Jessica, in her mind, were nothing more than disruptors who devalued the store's brand. This fundamental clash created 2 irreconcilable extremes in that small showroom that morning. On one side stood Jessica, the woman who had risen from suffering, determined to protect each customer's dignity. On the other stood Rebecca, the woman who clung to the belief that power, race, and wealth were the default barriers to true luxury. That conflict, smoldering like an ember, needed only a spark to ignite and burn away every mask of counterfeit high society culture. And Jessica knew that today, right in the very place she had painstakingly built, the greatest test of her life's philosophy and her business principles was about to begin. That's why nowhere showcases this opposing philosophy more clearly than the Diamond Luxe boutique in Beverly Hills, the crown jewel on the legendary Rodeo Drive. Among the world's most iconic fashion houses, Diamond Luxe gleams with its glittering glass facade, gold-accented logo, and lavish interior design down to the tiniest detail. Crystal chandeliers hang from the ceiling, the floors are pristine white marble, and display cases sparkle with jewelry. Everything exudes power, elegance, and allure. This store is not only Jessica Carter's pride, but also tangible proof of her extraordinary journey. Once denied entry at the door, she now stands as the founder of a sanctuary of recognition and respect. Diamond Luxe on Rodeo Drive doesn't just serve Los Angeles' wealthiest clientele. It's a destination for Hollywood stars, top athletes, major international executives, and even visiting royalty whenever they come to California. However, to Rebecca Wilson, this place isn't simply a jewelry store. It's a fortress of status where she is the gatekeeper. Hailing from a wealthy Greenwich, Connecticut family, Rebecca was raised on the unspoken rules of America's elite, who deserves a welcome, who should be kept at a safe distance, and who belongs only outside looking in through the glass. From the day she was appointed manager of this flagship location, Rebecca gave herself the privilege of deciding who was worthy. She spent more time scrutinizing the appointment book for prestigious regulars than she did noticing unknown customers who walked in unannounced. Every gesture, every look from Rebecca was practiced to send a silent message. Here, only the truly qualified get the full Diamond Luxe experience. That attitude was evident from the moment customers arrived. Well-dressed white men and elegantly attired ladies in Chanel or Hermès would be offered chilled champagne by Rebecca, escorted to a VIP seating area, and engaged in friendly conversation about limited-edition diamond collections. For longtime patrons, like Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, the real estate billionaire couple everyone on Rodeo Drive had heard of, Rebecca always reserved her brightest smile, greeting them as if they were family. But if anyone arrived who didn't meet her criteria, especially customers of color, dressed simply or arriving alone like Jessica did that morning, Rebecca transformed into someone else entirely. Her gaze turned icy, her voice slow and suspicious, as she deliberately kept them at arm's length and refused to let them near the store's most valuable pieces. In Rebecca's mind, these people were mere passers-by, even a threat to devalue the brand she believed she was protecting. No one in the store, including longtime employees, dared challenge or question Rebecca's way of greeting customers. Behind her polished exterior and professional demeanor, she actually controlled every detail of daily operations. Assistants like Kevin Brown or younger sales associates like Ashley Tran all knew. A single disapproving look from Rebecca could mean a shifted work schedule, lost bonuses, or even a sudden firing without explanation. As a result, the store's underground culture became warped. Rebecca's authority meant that the positive values Jessica had built could be undone with just one managerial decision. So when Jessica Carter, the rightful owner of the Diamond Luxe empire, walked into that flagship location unrecognized that morning, she not only faced Rebecca's ingrained prejudice, but also the undercurrent of discrimination sustained by the misplaced pride and fear of this new gatekeeping class. And here, in this crown jewel on Rodeo Drive, the clash between two worlds, one of equality, the other of entrenched bias, was poised to erupt into a blaze that nobody could extinguish. Like an invisible thread connecting two fates, that morning Jessica Carter deliberately chose the crown jewel on Rodeo Drive for her undercover visit. A decision that seemed random, but in truth carried a strong premonition. The moment her beat-up Toyota pulled up on the curb, it immediately stood out among the lineup of sleek luxury cars, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Porsches, that usually graced the entrance of Diamond Luxe. Stepping through the automatic glass doors, Jessica immediately felt the cold blast of the air conditioning mingled with the chill emanating from scrutinizing eyes. No one noticed her smoothing down the lapel of her jacket or the barely perceptible touch of her hand on that weathered silver bracelet. Everyone only saw a casually dressed woman of color who looked out of place in this world of opulence. Rebecca Wilson, who had been standing nearby conversing with a regular client, almost instantly fixed her sharp gaze on Jessica. In that instant, from that single look came all the judgments and prejudices. Someone who does not belong here. Jessica stayed calm and gently made her way to the central display case. There, the Aurora collection, Diamond Luxe's pride and joy, shone brilliantly under custom-designed lighting. Each piece cradled in a deep purple velvet box, glittering with some of the world's rarest diamonds. Aurora was not only the brand's most expensive collection, but also a symbol of the pinnacle of craftsmanship. Featuring a necklace worth $1.5 million that had graced the necks of leading actresses on Oscar, Cannes, and Met Gala red carpets. "Excuse me, I'd like to see the Aurora collection," Jessica said in a soft yet firm voice, her eyes betraying the understanding of someone who had been immersed in the jewelry world for years. Rebecca paused for a moment. Her polite smile vanished the instant she heard that request. She cast Jessica another look from head to toe, then tried to mask her embarrassment with a tone that was both condescending and dismissive. "Aurora is our store's top-tier collection. Each piece is priced in the hundreds of thousands to even millions of dollars. Normally, we only show it to customers who have appointments or a special letter of introduction." Rebecca's voice dropped, as if reminding Jessica of her place without saying it outright. Jessica didn't respond with frustration. She simply smiled and replied with rare composure. "I understand the value of Aurora. I genuinely want to admire it." Still, Rebecca refused to relent in her attempt to keep the doors closed. She pivoted, deliberately changing the subject and suggesting some more affordable bracelets, implicitly implying that Jessica should not even dream of those expensive masterpieces behind the glass. Jessica's unwavering determination faced off directly against Rebecca's quiet, ingrained conservatism, like two countercurrents on the verge of colliding. Meanwhile, the store's employees began to watch surreptitiously. Kevin, the young assistant manager seated behind the register, furrowed his brow at Rebecca's sudden change in demeanor. Ashley Tran, the petite sales associate of Asian descent, instinctively tightened her grip on her notepad. She knew full well that if this had been any other customer, especially a wealthy white patron, Rebecca would have personally unlocked the safe and brought out diamonds with utmost reverence. But this morning, in Rebecca's eyes, Aurora had to be protected from unworthy people. Indeed, every motion Rebecca made, sliding her keys into the display case lock, was deliberate and slow, her eyes never leaving Jessica for a second, as though she were facing some latent threat rather than a genuine customer. This was no longer just safeguarding assets. It was defending the invisible barrier Rebecca had erected the moment she was appointed manager of this store. And in that perfectly lit showroom, a silent examination of self-worth, prejudice, and covert power had begun, waiting only for the first misstep or word out of place to ignite. No one realized that in that moment, amid flawless diamonds, a hidden wave of inequality had begun to stir, promising to shatter the calm of this crown jewel on Rodeo Drive. Rebecca Wilson finally relented and inserted the key into the lock, her normally confident hands deliberately slow, as if she were weighing some unseen threat rather than simply serving a customer. Every movement she made radiated excessive caution, and in the sideways glance she cast at Jessica was a blatant note of suspicion. In that moment, the space around the Aurora display case felt reduced to only two women, one exuding a covert, challenging authority, the other hiding unease behind a professional facade. "I'll repeat," Rebecca emphasized, each word like an icy blade. "The Aurora collection consists entirely of one-of-a-kind, extremely expensive designs. Customers are generally not allowed to approach it without documentation proving their financial capacity or a history of purchases here." Her statement carried not only clear discrimination but also an implicit denial of Jessica's right to appreciate beauty or make selections, simply because Jessica didn't fit the type of customer Rebecca assumed. As she spoke, Rebecca continued to eye Jessica from head to toe, unable to hide her doubt and disdain. Sharp, probing questions slipped out amid a forced, condescending smile. Do you want to view it for reference, or do you actually intend to buy something? If you plan to purchase, I'll need to verify your account or credit card. This collection isn't suitable for just anyone. You understand that, right? Jessica responded with patience, her every word calm, but her eyes betrayed both disappointment and tightly restrained anger. She didn't directly address her financial means. Instead, she focused on professional questions about materials and craftsmanship. Jessica's questions were so precise and knowledgeable that Rebecca appeared momentarily flustered, yet, rather than soften her attitude, she grew even more guarded, hiding her discomfort behind unnecessary movements and polite but pointed language. Just then, the doorbell chimed. A familiar white couple, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, Diamond Luxe's VIP clients, stepped in under the radiant sunlight from outside. Rebecca instantly transformed. Her face brightened, her voice softened, and she released her grip on the Aurora Display's key to hurry over to the honored guests. Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. It's truly an honor to host you today. Is this your wedding anniversary? I'll have champagne ready right away. Rebecca's beaming smile stayed on her face the whole way as she walked away from Jessica, leaving her standing alone beside the half-unlocked display case. Jessica's presence reduced to mere background scenery for the grand reception. In the eyes of the young employees, the injustice was painfully obvious, yet no one dared to speak up or intervene. Rebecca gently pulled out a chair for the Andersons, guiding them through each diamond with the dedication of a consummate host, while Jessica quietly waited, ignored and unattended, like a blade driven deep into the principles Diamond Luxe once proudly claimed to uphold. Jessica didn't turn to leave, nor did she break the store's outwardly peaceful atmosphere. She chose silence, letting each passing second serve as undeniable proof of the invisible power Rebecca wielded, the right to decide who was a valued guest and who was an outsider, based solely on skin color, appearance, and prejudice. Yet behind that silence, a storm was gathering inside Jessica, ready to tear away every hypocritical mask of high society on Rodeo Drive. Time passed heavily amid the luxury sounds, the soft strains of classical music, the gentle clink of glasses from the VIP table, and the warm glow reflecting off the meticulously cut diamonds. In a corner of the room, Jessica still stood silently beside the Aurora display case, arms folded over her chest, her gaze steady yet tinged with fatigue and hurt. With each passing second, she felt the weight of isolation and alienation growing, as if the very air were trying to push her out by invisible force. Nearly 15 minutes went by, and Rebecca remained cheerfully engaged in conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, endlessly praising their taste and describing each gemstone in a voice as smooth and persuasive as silk. Occasionally, she shot a sideways glance at Jessica, but those looks only grew colder, as if to emphasize that this woman of color was not worthy to intrude on the space reserved for the deserving. Finally, when the Andersons had selected a few pieces and were offered their second glass of champagne, Jessica decided to step forward and speak politely. "Excuse me, I'm still interested in that Aurora necklace. I would like to buy it today." Her words came softly, but carried the weight of a pride pushed to its limit. The atmosphere seemed to pause for a moment. Both Rebecca and the VIP customers reflexively turned their eyes toward her. Rebecca startled briefly, but quickly regained her haughty composure. She gave a thin smile, her eyes filled with biting irony, then shrugged. "That necklace is priced at $350,000. I will need you to provide proof of financial capability, either a high-limit credit card or a bank confirmation letter. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to assist you." Her voice did more than express doubt. It was a public, cold, and uncompromising insult. The irony was that, throughout her years as store manager, Rebecca had never required any financial documents when serving customers like the Andersons, the Hayeses, or Mrs. Middleton, wealthy white patrons who walked in, dressed to the nines, and were instantly trusted. Jessica was not the only one who noticed. Ashley Tran, standing behind the register, unconsciously tightened her grip on her notepad, her eyes brimming with indignation and shame on behalf of her colleague. Kevin Brown also looked up, tension etched across his face. He understood Diamond Luxe's policy all too well. No one has the right to demand financial proof unless there were clear signs of fraud, and under no circumstances should any customer be discriminated against. Jessica maintained her calm demeanor. She responded slowly, meeting Rebecca's eyes directly, her voice pitched just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Let me clarify. Is this a requirement for all customers or only for me?" Rebecca did not falter. In fact, she laughed louder, folding her arms across her chest in a challenging posture. "For high-end transactions, this is our standard procedure. If you cannot present the appropriate documents, I must direct you to our mid-range fashion jewelry collection, priced under $500. Perhaps those items will be more suited to your circumstances." That final remark cut into Jessica's pride like a blade, laying bare Rebecca's prejudice and discrimination in front of every employee, the VIP customers, and anyone else in the store. All eyes turned to Jessica, some filled with sympathy, others with shock, and a few reflecting the silent understanding of those who had also endured injustice. In that luxurious setting, the insult Jessica endured felt not only personal, but also a direct challenge to every value she had fought to uphold. And in that moment, a silent flame flickered to life, foretelling a storm that could sweep away every false pretense that had held sway over this place for so many years. The air, already thick with tension, seemed to freeze when Jessica remained standing by the Aurora display, her gaze unflinching and steadfast. That composure only made Rebecca Wilson more irritable, as if Jessica's calm defiance directly challenged the power Rebecca had assumed for herself over all these years at Diamond Luxe. Irritated by Jessica's resolve and the quietly disapproving glances around the room, Rebecca abruptly shifted her tone, no longer the icy, covertly contemptuous manager, but openly aggressive. She lowered her voice, yet each word echoed sharply through the grand space. "I don't have time for this nonsense. If you can't prove you have the financial means but insist on demanding to see million-dollar pieces, I have to assume you're here to steal, or at the very least, to cause trouble." Each syllable sliced at Jessica's honor and dignity. A surge of suppressed outrage flared in Jessica's eyes, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed or doubted because they didn't fit the standard in the eyes of someone like Rebecca. Sensing that she held the upper hand, thanks to Jessica's silence and the uneasy stares around her, Rebecca took it a step further. She turned toward the store entrance and called out loudly, "Marcus, over here. I want you to escort this woman out immediately. She's not a customer and very likely intends to steal." Marcus Jones, Diamond Luxe's longtime security guard, appeared in the doorway. He was large and imposing, with a cautious gaze and a calm, military-honed demeanor. Marcus knew the store's security protocols intimately, but he also understood Diamond Luxe's commitment to fairness, and, more importantly, he'd witnessed more than one situation in which customers were treated disrespectfully for unacceptable reasons. He stepped forward, his eyes sweeping briefly over Jessica before turning to Rebecca. His tone was measured yet firm. Miss Wilson, is there any specific behavior that requires my intervention? She's simply a customer asking to purchase jewelry. Rebecca clenched her teeth, anger flaring in her eyes at Marcus's insubordination. She raised her voice, each word sharp enough to cut off further debate. You don't need to question me, Marcus. This is an order. If you don't obey, I'll report you to the board for obstructing business, or you'll be fired on the spot. And Kevin, you too. If I see you standing there doing nothing, both of you will be out of a job. Her threat rang coldly through the luxurious space, like a hammer striking the store's false calm. Kevin Brown, the young assistant manager who'd been watching anxiously, faltered for a moment. He glanced at Marcus, then at Jessica, torn between his conscience and his fear of losing his job. Marcus, however, did not avert his eyes from Jessica. He gave her a slight nod, barely noticeable, but full of sympathy, and a silent promise that he would not allow this injustice to continue, if there was any way he could stop it. The entire store seemed to hold its breath. Everyone, staff and curious customers alike, sensed they were witnessing Rebecca deliberately crossing an ethical line, moving from discreet discrimination to overt insult, from false authority to blatant abuse of power, all to satisfy her own prejudice and protect her ego. Jessica remained motionless, but her expression hardened. She understood that this moment was bigger than herself. It was a crucial test of the brand's honor and the principle of fairness she had worked so hard to build. And in that chilling silence of isolation, she chose to stand her ground rather than back down, ready to confront the storm Rebecca had just unleashed in the heart of Rodeo Drive. While the entire store seemed frozen by Rebecca's insulting words and abuse of authority, Jessica Carter remained standing tall, utterly composed, her eyes shining with the resilience of someone who had endured the harshest injustices. She did not react with anger or raised voice, nor did she bow or retreat. Rather, her chilling calmness became a silent power, causing every sound around her to falter. Jessica's hand gently touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, then quietly drew her phone from her blazer pocket. Her movements were soft yet decisive, as if this moment had been long anticipated. Under the stark white lights, her phone's screen glowed in her hand, prompting every eye in the store to focus on the woman who had just been humiliated, yet still carried herself like a true leader. Rebecca hesitated for an instant, her face shifting from anger to worry and then confusion. Before she could understand Jessica's intentions, she heard a steady, precise voice cut through the heavy atmosphere. "Hello, is this Diamond Luxe headquarters? This is Jessica Carter. I'm at the Beverly Hills store. I need an emergency meeting with the entire board of directors. Immediately." Those few words hit everyone like a thunderclap. Kevin Brown, the assistant manager, stared wide-eyed in disbelief. Ashley Tran, at the cashier's desk, fell silent, her lips trembling as she recalled seeing Jessica's photo in last month's internal email. Marcus Jones, the security guard, clenched his fist, blinking as if to confirm he hadn't misheard. Rebecca, who had initially planned to sneer, froze in her tracks, her face draining of color. Doubt, fear, and confusion replaced her usual smug confidence. In an instant, the false authority Rebecca had built crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide of Jessica Carter's real competence and determination. All around, remaining customers began whispering and raising their phones to record. Everyone realized they were witnessing a historic moment, where roles, power, and truth were being overturned by a single revelation. While waiting for a response on the line, Jessica said nothing more to Rebecca. She simply stood there, holding her phone with a cold serenity, her eyes reflecting both disappointment and an unshakable firmness. That composure was not submission, but the strength of someone who knew her own worth and understood her power. The power of a founder, a leader, and a guardian of dignity for all generations to come. This was no longer a mere personal dispute. The truth about Jessica's identity was unfolding, stripping away layers of prejudice, false power, and hypocrisy right before the entire staff, customers, and those watching live on their phones. The atmosphere had transformed from flashy calm into an arena where honor, justice, and truth confronted cowardice, arrogance, and blind pride. Above all, Jessica Carter's terrifying calm was the clarion call of irreversible change, not only for Diamond Luxe, but for all the supposedly immutable values of this crown jewel on Rodeo Drive. The moment Jessica Carter clearly spoke her name into the phone, the luxurious space, normally filled with hushed conversation and polite laughter, felt as though someone had just dropped a 1,000-pound boulder into the middle of the room. Each syllable of Jessica Carter rang out deliberately, slowly enough that everyone in the store could grasp its weight. Kevin Brown was the first to react. Memories of the internal meeting, when Jessica's image had appeared on the big screen with the label Founder and CEO, the Heart of Diamond Luxe, flashed vividly in his mind. He whipped his head toward Rebecca, then back to Jessica, his face draining of color, his throat suddenly dry. He muttered under his breath, barely audible, "No way!" Ashley Tran, the young salesperson at the counter who had only been at Diamond Luxe for a few months, also understood exactly who Jessica Carter was within the company. She scrambled for her phone, quickly scrolling to last month's email that showed the CEO's beaming photo next to the Aurora collection. The very collection Rebecca had been blocking Jessica from seeing. Ashley's lips trembled, and her eyes widened in shock when she realized that the woman being publicly insulted right before her eyes was the founder of the very world she was fighting to belong to. At the center of this storm was Rebecca Wilson, utterly disoriented. She stood frozen, her fingers gripping the display case key as if trying to cling to a reality that was falling apart. All those little details she had always dismissed. Jessica's calm composure, her discerning gaze, her intimate knowledge of jewelry, suddenly stood out in Rebecca's mind with painful clarity. Rebecca's once careless confidence dissolved, replaced by stark horror and humiliation spreading across her ashen face. No one could forget the look on Rebecca's face when the truth hit her. First confusion, then panic, and finally full-blown terror. She didn't dare turn to look at her staff or the customers. She could only stammer, "No, no way, that's her?" Every gaze in the store wavered. The customers who had quietly watched the confrontation now whispered and pointed, some already filming on their phones to capture this once-in-a-lifetime moment. A presumptuous manager who had loudly insulted, threatened, and discriminated against a customer, completely unaware that the very person standing before her was the CEO of the company whose fate rested in her hands. It wasn't just Rebecca who was stunned. Marcus Jones, the typically stoic guard who had seen his fair share of absurdities in the service industry, also stood speechless for a long moment before nodding slightly, as though he finally understood everything. In his gaze, there was both respect and admiration for Jessica, and a deep pity for the manager who had thought herself the queen of this place. The truth had been revealed in a flash, and its consequences were just as powerful. Rebecca began gasping for breath, her face vacant, her legs trembling so she could barely stand. She tried to muster a conciliatory smile, but any apologies seemed to choke in her throat. Her cowardice showed in every averted glance and every jittery movement of her hand along the countertop. Jessica, however, remained standing tall, her eyes never leaving Rebecca's. Her look conveyed disappointment, icy resolve, and a hint of sadness. The sadness of someone who had entrusted power to subordinates, believing they would protect the values she had spent her life building. Yet, in that very moment, Jessica knew it was time for the truth to be weighed, not just to judge one individual, but to reaffirm the honor, culture, and spirit of fairness at Diamond Luxe before the eyes of everyone present. What had just unfolded was more than a simple business mistake. It was the painful downfall of an entire mindset, a culture of entitlement, complacency, and arrogance that Jessica Carter had spent her life fighting against. The very moment Rebecca Wilson realized the truth, every shield she had built over the years collapsed. In a matter of seconds, the woman who once wielded absolute power on Rodeo Drive became nothing more than a lost soul within her own kingdom. Her arrogance and pride shattered without a trace. Rebecca staggered backward toward the wall, her trembling fingers still clutching the display case key as if trying to anchor herself to a crumbling reality. All eyes in the store turned to her, looks that combined pity, embarrassment, and a cold judgment. The feeling of being stripped bare, exposed in front of employees, customers, and the countless phones silently recording everything, must have felt like an unending nightmare. And then, Rebecca could no longer maintain her facade. She burst into tears, each ragged sob echoing through a space normally reserved for soft, genteel conversation. Her expensive makeup streaked down in ugly lines across a face that usually appeared flawless. "Oh, please, Miss Carter, I didn't know. I truly didn't know. If I had realized, I would never have. Please give me another chance. I have a family. I have a young child. I took this job because of the pressure, because I wanted to protect the store's reputation." Rebecca's broken voice tumbled out like waves crashing on a desperate shore. She clung to a last scrap of compassion from Jessica and from everyone else watching. Each excuse only deepened her despair, invoking her children, her financial burdens, the sleepless nights spent worrying about the brand's image. But Jessica Carter stood her ground, her expression unmoved. The cold resolve on her face was not cruelty. It was the strength of someone who had suffered and understood the damage that prejudice and blind authority inflict on so many. She looked at Rebecca, no longer a powerful manager but just another flawed human being, in the eyes of a leader, the founder of an empire built on fairness and respect. "Rebecca, there's no need to make excuses. There are cameras here, there are employees, there are customers. Everything has been recorded. You didn't just insult me. You insulted the very core values that Diamond Luxe represents. No one forced you to do this. That was a choice reflecting your own mindset and character." Jessica's voice was steady but as sharp as steel, completely unmoved by the tears and pleas. She wasn't speaking only to Rebecca. She was speaking to every employee, every customer, and to the outside world, declaring that at Diamond Luxe, not a single person, even the one with the greatest power, stands above the collective moral code. Rebecca continued to plead, tears streaming down her cheeks as she dropped to her knees in supplication. I will change. I will take classes on equality and proper conduct. Just give me one more chance." But Jessica shook her head, her gaze extinguishing every last flicker of hope. "You had hundreds of chances every day, every time you treated a customer with prejudice and contempt. No one is born perfect, but everyone has the right to choose not to hurt others. Today, you chose to inflict pain with the authority you were given." The store fell into a suffocating silence. Rebecca's tears no longer moved anyone. Jessica's coldness was not callousness but impartial justice. protecting the principles she had painstakingly built so that Diamond Luxe would truly be a place where everyone is valued. Rebecca collapsed, her entire body trembling, knowing that every door had closed behind her. And that was the price one pays for an ideology that has no place in a world built on fairness and human dignity. Rebecca's desperate pleas hovered like a lonely echo in the suddenly silent space. Jessica Carter stood before her, her expression no longer icy but resolute, tinged with pity for those entrusted with upholding Diamond Luxe's honor, only to shatter it with ingrained prejudice. Jessica's gaze swept across the store. The young employees holding their breath, the stunned customers, and the phones quietly recording this historic moment. Jessica took a step forward. Her voice rang out, clear and indisputable, slicing through the thick tension. "Rebecca Wilson, effective immediately, you are no longer the manager of Diamond Luxe Beverly Hills. I'm asking you to gather your personal belongings and leave the store at once." That declaration wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision but the culmination of ongoing observation, evaluation, and many prior chances for redemption. Jessica didn't need to shout or rail. Her authority came from sincerity, a reputation built over 20 years, and the trust the entire company had placed in her hands. Rebecca collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she clawed desperately at any excuse, her voice breaking into fragments. Please, Miss Carter, I only wanted to do my job well. I gave it my all. I was afraid unworthy customers would damage the store's reputation. Please, just give me one more chance." But Jessica shook her head, refusing to offer any false hope. She looked directly at the woman kneeling before her, her words firm and more piercing than any public reprimand. "This isn't the first time I've received complaints about your discriminatory attitude. Reports that you've refused customers of color or accidentally belittled staff who didn't meet your standards have been circulating for months. I warned you repeatedly and even gave you opportunities to change. But today, in the very place I've poured my faith in justice and equality into, you chose to repeat your mistakes. You not only harmed me, but you also hurt every person you've belittled over the years." Rebecca's weeping intensified. Her apologies spilled forth like a broken dam, but now no one offered her sympathy. One by one, the staff recalled moments they'd felt judged, by their backgrounds, their outfits, their very presence, enduring cruel remarks and cold stares because they feared their manager's power. Customers began whispering. Some nodded in agreement, others looking at Jessica with admiration and relief. Ashley Tran, a team member who had previously been reprimanded simply for speaking kindly to a customer below their station, shed tears of hope. Kevin Brown, behind the counter, exhaled in relief, feeling that justice had finally been restored. Jessica did not linger. She turned to Marcus and Ashley, her words decisive. "Marcus, please ensure Rebecca leaves the store quietly. Kevin, you will serve as interim manager until a new appointment is made. Ashley, thank you for your patience and for treating every customer with fairness." Rebecca stumbled to her feet, tears blurring her vision, desperately clutching at her last shred of dignity. But this store was no longer her kingdom. It was a place where justice had been reestablished, where bias had been exposed and ended. In that solemn atmosphere, Jessica Carter proved an undeniable truth. A brand's strength doesn't lie in diamonds or gold, but in its moral values, its kindness, and its courage to stand against injustice, even when that means personally ending the long-held reign of the very gatekeeper who once guarded Diamond Luxe. The moment Rebecca's forlorn figure disappeared through the glass doors, the Diamond Luxe showroom felt as if it had been lifted from a dark, oppressive fog that had lingered for months, perhaps even years. The tension and vague fear of arbitrary authority evaporated, leaving behind an indescribable sense of relief. Jessica Carter still stood in the center of the foyer, dignified yet no longer cold. Her eyes now held warmth and kindness, directed toward those who had quietly chosen justice amid the storm of injustice. She looked straight at Kevin Brown, the young assistant manager who, that entire morning, had silently struggled to uphold the company's principles despite pressure from above. Kevin stood behind the counter, his hands tightly clasped, still shaken by the risk he'd taken in defying Rebecca at the critical moment. But as Jessica approached, her gaze conveyed both recognition and trust. "Kevin," Jessica said in a measured but firm tone, "today you showed me what a true manager must have: conscience, fairness, and courage. From this moment on, I hereby appoint you as the official manager of Diamond Luxe Beverly Hills." Surprise, emotion, and pride blossomed across Kevin's face. He stammered, nearly unable to believe his ears, his eyes brimming with tears, proof that all his months of silent perseverance and quiet battles had finally been noticed and rewarded. Jessica turned to Ashley Tran, the young sales associate whose large, round eyes shone with tears. Ashley had once been on the receiving end of Rebecca's scolding simply for treating every customer with kindness and equity, regardless of skin color, clothing, or background. It was Ashley who had quietly stood by Jessica when no one else would, offering help even though she risked receiving Rebecca's scornful glance. "Ashley," Jessica said with a gentle smile, "your kindness and integrity are the core values Diamond Luxe stands for. I appoint you as the new assistant manager. You deserve to grow and be heard even more in the days ahead." Ashley's hands trembled as she covered her face, tears streaming down, not out of shame, but from overwhelming gratitude and emotion. In that moment, the entire store seemed to shine with newfound hope. Finally, Jessica looked to Marcus Jones, the quiet yet steadfast security guard who had the courage to refuse wrongful orders and prioritize ethics over blind obedience. Marcus stood tall, his face resolute, but his eyes betraying deep emotion as he was personally acknowledged by the CEO. "Marcus, I know you've endured difficult times and faced injustice before, but today you showed everyone that principles and dignity must come first. You will be rewarded for your professionalism and receive a raise. I also want you to lead the security training program for our entire system. Your courage deserves to be shared and celebrated." For a moment, the showroom fell silent, and then broke into gentle nods, admiring glances, and hesitant but proud applause from the entire team. Recognizing Kevin, Ashley, and Marcus was more than just honoring individual achievements. It was a powerful message to everyone at Diamond Luxe. Here, only genuine values and integrity are truly rewarded. Never cunning, never prejudice, and never the false power built on fear. Jessica quietly surveyed the showroom, her heart swelling with faith that, from the simplest acts, speaking fairly, offering an empathetic look, and having the courage to stand for what's right, Diamond Luxe would forever remain the shining jewel of justice and human dignity on the proud avenue of Rodeo Drive. The jubilation, gratitude, and newly reborn sense of faith in the air at Diamond Luxe hadn't yet had a chance to settle when, outside, public reaction erupted. Videos recorded by customers, capturing Rebecca Wilson's open denigration of Jessica Carter and Jessica's calm declaration of identity before firing the manager on the spot, spread swiftly across social media. Within just a few hours, the name Diamond Luxe appeared on countless news sites, accompanied by comments of shock, outrage, and admiration for the way the black female CEO handled the situation so authoritatively. Faced with intense media scrutiny, Jessica Carter did not shy away. right there in the Beverly Hills storefront. Diamond Luxe's crown jewel, the very place where the undercurrent of bias had just been swept away. She proactively arranged a small press conference, inviting all staff, customers, and media representatives to bear witness. Dressed in a simple navy blazer, Jessica appeared without a hint of pretense, her face radiating the quiet confidence, strength, and authority that only those who have weathered both storms and triumphs can possess. Behind her stood the Aurora display counter, now restored to an orderly state. Newly rewarded employees flanked her, chins lifted in pride and trust. Jessica did not speak with flowery rhetoric. She began instead by recounting her experience from earlier that morning. I built Diamond Luxe to be a place where everyone is respected, regardless of background, skin color, or appearance. But today, in the very place I carefully cultivated, I witnessed a painful truth. Prejudice still lingers, even under this roof I love. Her gaze swept over everyone in the room, pausing on the lenses of cameras aimed at her. We apologize to every customer who has ever been turned away, who has ever felt they did not belong in any Diamond Luxe store. I want you to know this will never happen again. We do not merely sell jewelry, we sell faith, fairness, and the right to be yourself. A reporter shouted, "What do you believe is Diamond Luxe's most distinctive value, Ms. Carter?" Jessica smiled, meeting the question head-on. True value is not in the most precious diamond, but in how we treat one another. I would rather keep an unsold gem than sell someone's dignity, and if I must choose between profit and ethics, I will choose ethics, because that is the only foundation for a lasting empire. Every word Jessica spoke was definitive and powerful, leaving an impression not only on the customers and staff present, but also on all who watched the video feed. On social media, positive comments flooded in. A lesson in genuine leadership. Diamond Luxe deserves to be the new symbol of justice and respect. A bold, uncompromising stand against injustice. I'm going to shop there to show my support. Inside the store, many employees who once felt insignificant or fearful under Rebecca's authority now looked at Jessica with genuine gratitude. Kevin, now promoted to manager, stepped forward to speak. I used to think I was too small to change anything. But today, thanks to Ms. Carter, I understand. As long as someone dares to do what's right, everything can change. Jessica nodded, giving him a look of empathy and encouragement. She knew that it was not just Diamond Luxe that needed champions, but society at large. People needed to speak up and defend justice, even if doing so meant severing the safety net built on prejudice, self-interest, and fear. In front of cameras and every customer, Jessica Carter closed with a firm declaration. I promise, at Diamond Luxe, no one will be left behind simply because they are different. We will thoroughly review our entire system, implement additional training on equality, and enforce stringent discipline for any discriminatory behavior. Fairness is not an option, it is a necessity. That afternoon, Diamond Luxe's Beverly Hills store ceased to be merely the stage for a confrontation. It became the emblem of a powerful transformation, one born from the courage to face truth, and from the heart of a woman who had once been underestimated but refused to let herself, or anyone else, lose their dignity. The press conference ended in solemn silence and admiring glances for Jessica Carter. As the last members of the media and customers left the store, the Diamond Luxe Beverly Hills showroom returned to its calm. But it was not the same as before. The oppressive haze of prejudice had lifted, replaced by a sense of relief and openness, as if the dust of time had finally been swept away from their hearts. Rebecca Wilson had departed, carrying her humiliation and regret, no longer just losing her job, but forced to confront the fact that her own attitude had destroyed everything she once took pride in. No one spoke harsh words to send her off. The price of arrogance, stubbornness, and bigotry can sometimes be utter isolation, with no one left to empathize. Jessica remained in the empty store, walking quietly from display case to display case. She straightened a velvet box in the Aurora showcase, arranged the chair Rebecca had been using for VIP guests, and neatly stacked brochures that had fallen to the floor. Those small actions, seemingly just tidying up, were actually Jessica's way of restoring order, fairness, and trust in a space that had been shaken by injustice. She did not rush to make sweeping decisions or use her power to exert authority. Instead, she rearranged everything with the patience, calm, and care of someone who truly understood the value of compassion. Looking around the store, Jessica realized that the deepest changes were not material but spiritual. Kevin, now the manager, quietly watched over the staff, offering encouragement and support. Ashley, still emotional from her recent promotion, greeted each customer warmly, bringing genuine kindness to everyone she encountered. Marcus stood at the entrance, offering a courteous smile to every passerby, his eyes no longer wary, but filled with confidence and pride for having stood on the side of what was right. Jessica returned to the center of the showroom and placed her hand against the glass of the Aurora case. She admired not only the brilliant diamonds, but also her own reflection. A woman who rose from poverty, who had once been discriminated against, yet never allowed bitterness to turn into hatred. For her, today's events were more than a judicial reckoning. They were a reminder, to herself and to everyone else, that the greatest power a human can wield is not in giving orders, but in having the courage to protect another person's dignity, no matter the circumstances. Later that day, in a brief internal meeting, Jessica spoke softly to everyone. True success isn't measured by what you achieve at the top, but by how you treat others once you've arrived there. Never let power or achievement obscure your compassion and sense of fairness. Her words brought the room to a hush. Every staff member understood that, from this day forward, Diamond Luxe would no longer be just a jewelry store. It would be a home for noble values, a place where anyone could expect respect, support, and encouragement to overcome prejudice and fear, and to live in alignment with their own dignity. Outside, the late afternoon sun stretched down Rodeo Drive, casting long shadows of Jessica and her new teammates onto the gleaming pavement. Customers began to return, not only for the perfect jewels, but because they believed this was a place where anyone, regardless of background, truly belonged, where they would be heard and given a chance. When the final lights in the store went dark, Jessica lingered for a moment, gently closing the door, holding on to a quiet but unwavering belief that compassion, kindness, and justice would always form the strongest foundation for any success. Only then could every diamond truly symbolize value, and every person, no matter where they came from, shine brightly in this world. Jessica Carter's story and Diamond Luxe's transformation aren't just lessons about justice and the courage to confront prejudice. They are a reminder of the power of compassion and kindness in every environment, even the most lavish. After all, true greatness isn't measured in gold and diamonds, but in how we treat each other when power and prestige rest in our hands. What would you do if you were in Jessica's shoes? Would you stand up, forgive, or take a completely different approach? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to click like, share it with friends, and subscribe so you won't miss our next touching, meaningful stories. Thank you for being with us.